Welcome to Know Your Food, the podcast where we explore the world of food by speaking with farmers, makers, entrepreneurs, and experts who are reshaping how we think about what we eat. I'm your host, Michael Ray Robinoff, CEO and co-founder of Farm to People. In today's episode, I sit down with Avery Stempel, a mushroom farmer, educator, and co-president of New Yorkers for Mental Health Alternatives. Avery runs Color City Mushrooms in upstate New York and is at the forefront of both culinary and medicinal mushroom movements. We get into everything from the realities of small-scale mushroom farming to the legislative path toward legal psilocybin access in New York State. Avery brings a rare blend of hands-in-the-soil experience and policy-level insight. We talk about mycelial thinking as a model for community, the barriers small farmers face in accessing capital and grants, and how education is key, whether you're foraging mushrooms or fighting for mental health equity. This conversation is hopeful, eye-opening, and full of practical wisdom for anyone curious about fungi, farming, or systems change. If you enjoy today's episode, please leave a review and share it with someone who values food as medicine and as connection. Now, here's my conversation with Avery Stempel. Avery Stempel, thank you so much for being here tonight. Excited to chat with you. As you mentioned, Avery, literally, you just came from a call that is in preparation for. Why don't you tell us? What was it? What are you working on? You've been busy.
Michael, thank you for inviting me to talk to all of you and to be here tonight. So not only am I a culinary mushroom farmer, but I am one of the co-presidents of New Yorkers for Mental Health Alternatives, which is an advocacy group that is working towards creating legal access for psilocybin-containing mushrooms here in New York. So at 7 o'clock on the second Tuesday of every month, we have a standing monthly meeting. And this one, I shared some really exciting news, so I will share it with all of you. New York Health Committee Assembly has a hearing scheduled where we'll go over testimony from lawyers, doctors, therapists, and veterans who have been working in the psychedelic space in order to show to the health committee that this is a substance that is not dangerous and people have been using effectively and safely, and that there can be a pathway forward for people's consumption.
That's amazing. So what's the next step after May towards this journey that I'm a big proponent of? I agree. I think we should be, if anything, and this is how I feel with a lot of drugs in general, but particularly ones that are grown naturally, that transparency and the ability to know where you're getting your drugs, whether it is so important to your safe use of those drugs.
Sure.
So yeah, where's New York and where's the country? You could also talk on a federal level. I know other states are maybe making more progress than New York. So what are we seeing?
Yeah, just today, New Mexico became the third state in the country to legalize psilocybin-containing mushrooms with a facilitator model. So Oregon and Colorado have both already passed similar laws, and basically you have to go to a center and sit with some facilitators and have a session and then have integration afterwards. And it's often very expensive because the people who are sitting with you have carrying life insurances and had to go through training processes and all this stuff. So New Mexico passed a similar bill, and two of the bills in New York create a similar model. So Assemblymember Pat Burke and Senator Natalia Fernandez, they have introduced a bill that creates a facilitator model and a pilot bill for first responders and veterans out in Western New York near the Buffalo area to get basically first access to these centers. They have also built into their bill a provision that allows for people with fewer resources some supplement in order to still get access to an experience. And Linda Rosenthal is a local assembly member. She has introduced a bill that would just decriminalize psilocybin-containing mushrooms and a variety of other naturally occurring substances that promote neuroplasticity. And then the bill that we are most excited about, because we feel that it creates the broadest access while providing safeguards for people, is was introduced by Assemblymember Amy Paulin and now is carried in the Senate by Julia Salazar, who I believe is...
she's here.
Yeah, both amazing lawmakers, and they are passionate about creating access. And so A2142 and S5305, they create a permit style bill. If you are interested in using psilocybin containing mushrooms, you would take an educational course and then take basically a permit license kind of test and show that you understand the side effects, the counter indicators, what you shouldn't take it with. There are some exclusionary conditions. So if you have a history of certain heart conditions or like schizophrenia or something like that, then you could be excluded from getting permission to take these legally. But once you've passed your test, then you can legally cultivate yourself. So you can grow at home and take it as you see fit. Or it also builds in provisions for farmers to grow it. That's one of the things that I wanted to make sure got put into the bill so that New York's mushroom farmers, first dibs on being able to provide these mushrooms as well to customers who ask for them all the time.
Wow. Yeah. So the demand is there.
The demand is there.
And so on that side, you're saying this third bill, the idea there is that folks would have to take a test to attain sort of a permit that would then make them able to purchase.
And so it's similar to medical cannabis when that first passed, where you have to have some condition,
like a card, like some sort of,
and you would get a card that would allow you to then purchase or grow your own. And there won't be dispensaries created as part of this bill, but like discrete courier systems. So similar to like delivery of your food, you also could get delivery of your medicine. And it will have a provision for facilitators as well, because many people, being a mushroom farmer, I do get asked all the time, hey, do you have those mushrooms? But just as many people are interested in very serious ways and for very serious purposes. My daughter has been on SSRIs for 20 years and is still suicidal, and I don't want her to leave. I've heard this is more effective than anything that pharmaceuticals can provide. My father is 90 and in hospice care and having a real hard time letting go, and I've heard that this helps. I have been diagnosed with adult ADHD, and I've tried all of these different pharmaceutical creations, and none of them make me as an effective human as microdosing psilocybin. And there's a myriad of reasons people take them for, not that recreation isn't legitimate, because recreation is a real part of our well care, but things that are holding them back from enjoying and participating in life. And so being able to legally consume something that really would help them just become a better contributing member of society is what we're working towards. And this also would provide for recreational use too.
Totally. You might just have to take a test.
Yeah, no, you right, exactly.
Yeah, totally. I think that's really, it's interesting to think about, and obviously I think it's impossible not to draw parallels to like medical marijuana. Could you talk more about the rollout of medical marijuana? If you think about California, I feel like California legalized medical marijuana, I want to say in like the mid-aughts, right? Like probably close to 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And then it's still obviously not federally legal. It's now legal and decriminal. I think it is federally decriminalized. No, not even.
Nope. No.
So yeah, and this is it's confusing for everyone. It's state by state. How do we avoid those pitfalls?
And that's one of the things that we have built into this bill is we have not called it medicine, because the minute you say something is prescribable, the FDA gets involved, and because it is still a Schedule I with no medicinal allowed uses, it cannot be prescribed. So cannabis had a memo, and I'm blanking on the name of the gentleman who wrote the memo, but basically a lawyer that worked for the government was like, oh, a bunch of states are passing these laws. Let's keep our hands out of it for now. And so this memo became a practicing document, and that held the feds back from persecuting doctors, prescribers, and medical therapists and things like that from saying, oh, you have knee pain, why don't you try cannabis for your pain? That kind of was a workaround for cannabis. There is no such memo for psilocybin containing mushrooms. So no one could say, oh, I think you should take this, and here's a script for it. Someone could suggest it right now, but that doesn't have the same weight as getting a prescription. So that's why we've crafted the bill in the way that we did in order to provide safe use and access with conditions. You could have a therapist or a doctor give a recommendation, but you can also self-report. So you don't have to go to that doctor and say, oh, here's $50, can you write me a script? So that's essentially what was happening with cannabis. It was
pay to play.
It was a pay to play. Where I feel like something with psilocybin is a little bit different than cannabis in that it does promote a neuroplasticity in a much stronger way. And you don't want to take 5 grams and go shopping or something like that because it's just probably not going to end well. But, so knowing what to expect in certain conditions and what safe methods there are to consume is really important. California, actually, the House and Senate passed a psilocybin consumption bill, but Governor Newsom vetoed it because he said that there wasn't enough education for potential consumers. And then we took that as inspiration for building that into the bill.
Interesting. So this way, that test implies that level of education, so it's not makes a lot of sense. Interesting. I guess zooming, we got right into the meat of it.
I know.
Hi,
everybody.
I think you have a unique path from philosophy and education to founding Collar City Mushrooms, which is your business. I feel like, talk to me, you do obviously culinary mushrooms as well, but you're at the forefront of this really other very important fight that I am super interested in. But what initially drew you to growing mushrooms and starting this business?
Sure, yeah. Well, mushrooms. I grew up on a sawmill in a very rural town. There isn't even a street light. I graduated with 78 other students. And for the first 5 years of my life, my mom would go with my dad in the log truck to the woodlots. And while my dad cut trees down and drove the skidder and bulldozer or whatever, my mom and I would wander around and look at the trees and look at the mushrooms and look at the rocks and pick some berries. And that really gave me the foundation for an enjoyment of the natural world and really appreciation for life in general. And when I got older and was in later high school years, I started experimenting with substances that promote neuroplasticity. And I was just like, wow, this is really intense and really impressive. And I, as a struggling middle schooler, was depressed. And that was one of the things that really helped me feel lighter and more engaged with life. I went to Siena, which is a small independent college near my hometown, and studied philosophy. And I was like, oh, I'm just thinking about thinking. This is really cool. And continued to enjoy various substances throughout my college years, and then had 2 children and became a teacher. So I taught elementary school, 1st and 3rd grade, and absolutely loved that. And I do love educating people. I love engaging with learners of all ages. We'll get into it a little bit later. But then I also oscillated between education and performing arts. So up until 2020, I was managing a 200,000 square foot performing arts space at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute called the Experimental Media and Performing Arts Center. And it was like a mecca to all things like flashy and experimental and electronic. And was always spending time in the forest and really looking at life and nature. And I'm a poet. I like poetry and drawing and things. And my children's mother and I decided to walk separate paths, and I found my mushroom life partner, who's here somewhere. And one of the things that brought us together was that our phones were filled with pictures of mushrooms in the wild. And so I was like, oh, you're my people. And I was just like, this is really cool. And she's like, yeah, I've been growing mushrooms. And I was like, you what? And she grew up near my hometown and actually was growing mushrooms in the next town over that was part of our Burn Knox Westerlo high school kind of conglomeration. And I went to my dad. I was like, hey, Dad, can you help us cut some more trees and let's grow some more mushrooms? And so at that point, it was just a hobby because I was still working for MPAC. And then in 2020, when the COVID pandemic forced gathering to pause for a while, I was furloughed. And a few years before, I had gone to a friend of mine who was basically practicing to be a life coach. And one of the things I talked to her about was like one day wanting to have a mushroom farm. And I charted out like what a mushroom farm and community gathering space and art center and thing would be. And went to one of my team meetings at MPAC and was like, hey, just so you know, I'm quitting in 5 years to start a mushroom farm. It was like 3 or 4 years later that the pandemic happened. And I was like, I guess I'm putting my money where my mouth is and we're starting a mushroom farm.
Incredible. And education, obviously now you're giving the background of what education means to you and how it was part of your pre-mushroom career. So makes a lot of sense. Why is education such a core part of your mission, and being active in politics and in government critical? Not every farmer is as involved, even when I think their voices are important. I think we're thinking about this too in the more broad global conversation with tariffs and how those are going to affect farmers both abroad and here, and global trade. It's great to meet a farmer that's really like prioritizing putting their voice and the education of what they're doing forward. So yeah, why is that a part of what you're doing?
I love learning new things, and I think that's really important. And if you don't learn a new thing in a day, I feel not that you failed, but you missed an opportunity.
That was such a teacherly way of putting it. My teacher always would tell me, not that you failed,
but you really did.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I love when someone takes something that they're unfamiliar with and gets a better understanding of it. And I feel like fungi in particular, there is a lot of mycophobia in this country in particular. And getting people to embrace and understand the mycelium way is important and is life-changing. And we have hiking groups that come in that, oh, I've been seeing mushrooms on the trail and I don't know anything about them. And then they would walk through our farm and I would give a little spiel and give them some hands-on stuff and talk about Ecovative, which was like right across the river from where we were growing, and talk about like NASA's like program to use radiotrophic mushrooms to help absorb radiation for the astronauts in space. And I love giving people those little kernels that they can walk away with and sparkle on for a while.
Totally. I think the mycelial network is so interesting, and it's really about regeneration and a lot of things that I care a lot about, supporting and promoting the idea of regenerative farming, all of this. There's even the idea or the term mycelial thinking, and this idea of group thinking, of thinking collaboratively, your idea of learning and learning together. Maybe for everyone here, what does the term mycelial thinking mean to you? How does it inform the way that you live and work?
Yeah, collaboration is the biggest crux of that. Mycelial thinking, mushrooms are the big decomposers, but they're also connectors. The mycorrhizal mushrooms like porcini and chanterelles, you were talking about those a little bit before, they are difficult to cultivate because they can't exist without a relationship with another living thing. Porcini, their hyphae excrete enzymes that break down bedrock, and they pull up those minerals and they trade them with pine trees for sugars. And that's how they live. And if there's a pine tree that's a little bit further away, they get a better deal. They get 3 sugars for every 1 mineral they give. So then they prioritize that trade with that further pine tree. They're total capitalists. It's so wild, but it's without a network, without connecting, and then without other people, we can't do anything. People often think that they're alone and striving and it's the American dream and I'm going to do everything on my own. That's actually impossible. You don't do anything without a network.
And mushrooms are like the ability to like trade further away is only done and facilitated because of a broader, healthier network.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So it's social capitalism.
It's yeah.
Going back to like, mushrooms and not necessarily the psilocybin variety, but we talked a little bit about, lion's mane, cordyceps, all of these others. Like, what excites you most about where the industry is heading as it pertains to mushrooms? And then where do you also think it's maybe a little, I think with anything like this, you get this flip side of overhype where you start to like lose, like, what are products that aren't going to make a difference? Or people are going to be like, I tried the lion's mane this or the cordyceps that, and I didn't notice a difference. And where you get this fear of, is it all bullshit?
So I am the psilocybin correspondent on the Committee for Medicinal Mushrooms with the North American Mycological Association. And so I meet monthly with people who have been in the mushroom world for decades. And they are really excited about the prevalence of interest in today's world. And we're actually creating a self-reporting database that people will have access through the NAMA's website where, oh, I'm taking lion's mane for cognition, or I'm taking turkey tail for cancer, or I'm using tremolo for my melanoma. And then you can write down if you've seen any noticeable things, and you can like build this database of people who have been using mushrooms. Now, it's subjective, so it's not concrete, but the intent is for future researchers to then look at this database and go, oh, look, 700 people said they were taking shiitake for vitamin D, and maybe we should look in that. Something's here, and then create some more like data-driven, rigorous studies. So that's one of the things that kind of really excites me, because it really is. People are starting to be more open about their witchy habits. And you mentioned, oh, I took this thing and it wasn't necessarily effective. There are many products on the market that are using mycelium on grain, and most of the research is pointing to the nutritive and medicinal qualities of those products being closer to whatever grain the mushroom is grown on. So instead of like a lion's mane product, you're really taking a millet product. So that's where some brand of mushroom coffee that you see ads for all the time on Facebook might not be very effective, but placebo is a very strong thing. So some people like take it and they go, this stuff is great. Oh my God, it's wonderful. But the research is actually not showing that the products made from those products are as effective.
Yeah, I always just wonder about that fear where something goes like from relative obscurity to snake oil salesman or something. People get that worry. And I think that can be really disruptive to something that I think we've all know people and have seen instances where it's been truly effective to someone who's truly dealing with something, or you can eat wonderful food that makes you feel better and feel good. I think everything is multi-sided, but I think we love a headline. We love a big story. We love to be proven right or wrong, or whichever side you're on. And I think some of these things can become more polarizing.
Yeah, and as much as we're all human, we do metabolize things in different ways.
Absolutely.
There are a lot of people who have a sensitivity to lion's mane and can't really digest it. If they took a supplement or something that had that in it that's supposed to produce a cognitive effect, they're going to get a digestive issue. It's unique to them, unfortunately.
For sure. And yeah, again, that's not unique to mushrooms. Like if you're gluten intolerant or if you have a soy. When it comes to envisioning a future where medicinal mushrooms and psychedelics are more widely accepted and integrated into wellness and healthcare, the thing that I get concerned about is big business becoming involved and all the guardrails that do get put up and monetizing it. And I think you're seeing that stories are now coming out in New York State, in California, and Colorado, like the small farmers are getting passed over for the cannabis, permits to licenses to grow or licenses to sell. And the state will make a big to-do about the first store being minority owned and then stores 2 through 1 million are not. And it seems problematic, and especially for marijuana and psilocybin, which are two, I think, really like alternative, ancient medicinal. These are plants. These aren't lab inventions, but the lab wants to figure out how to monetize it. Where do you see things like now that it's becoming a more popular conversation point? Government is starting to look at this, which is good and bad. Where could this go bad?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's part of why we encourage the bill to be written in such a way that it builds in provisions for farmers to be able to grow it instead of having pharmacies and universities control the production. And one of the things that most mushroom farmers struggle with is just having a smaller footprint. We were growing hundreds of pounds of food a week on 0.33 of an acre. I know Tivoli is only on about an acre, if not a little bit less, and they're making thousands of pounds a week. But still, the USDA requires 12.75 acres for you to be considered a farm. And so, mushroom producers will not have that because there's no need for that. And the idea that we will always have a smaller footprint doesn't necessarily mean our reach isn't broad. And that's where we have to retrain the public and the people who have been funding farming for so long to look at micro farms and small farms in a different way. So I think it comes down to education.
Totally. Yeah. That's a great segue into launching an indoor vertical farm. You did it during the pandemic.
Yeah.
What were some of the challenges to getting started? It was a dream that was years in the making. Starting a small farm is expensive, even if it's only 0.33 of an acre. So what was that like?
Sure is. Yeah. What were the challenges? All of them. All of them were the challenges. I think we wanted to be urban because I lived in the city, and I love Troy. Troy is a fantastic space. And I was like, oh, we could find one of these dilapidated buildings. And we looked at so many buildings that would have taken many more resources than we had in order to bring to a space that you could grow mushrooms in. Cultivating mushrooms requires sterility and a lot of really clean and controlled spaces. And then my realtor friend who was kind of showing us around showed us a place that was a little bit more developed. It was right on the Hudson River. It was a gorgeous location, but it was a little beyond our price range. And we went to the guy who was selling it and was like, hey, would you lease it to us? He was like, yeah, but I'll only give you 2 years to buy it. I didn't know as much as I should have in trying to execute a commercial real estate purchase, and you need a lot more money down. And without actually any resources from the grants that we thought they were going to be there, the farming funding that we assumed was going to be in place because we didn't have 12.75 acres, weren't available. And so the biggest struggle was finding a place that we absolutely fell in love with and wanted to hold on to, and really were massaging into this beautiful gathering space for, we had death metal concerts and poetry readings and a meditation club and a book club and all these things, but none of it really made a lot of money. And we were growing a lot of mushrooms and massaging that into being, figuring out the climate controls, figuring out how to just execute the process without any real training was how we tried to tackle it. So yeah, not having enough education in environmental controls and just cultivation in general, and then trying to over diversify what we were doing before we had a handle on the process was somewhat challenging. But now we've created such a strong community that people have really helped us with this transition to our new location, which is on a 400-acre farm. And we have access to all of the grounds we can forage on. We went from this urban, tight-knit kind of community to this broader, wider space. So yeah.
So walk us through that, because I think so many businesses when they're new, it's like stops and starts and pivots, and how many the mistakes are too many to count at a certain point. And then talk about also access to capital and how you're in the city, you were disqualified from some of these loans or potential grants. What were the mistakes made? You went into a facility, were ineligible for these things, so had to realize that you weren't going to get the capital you needed. How did you pivot to a new space? And now on that new land, are you now, even if you're only growing 0.33 of an acre of mushrooms because you're on this larger land and maybe able to claim it as farmland, are you now eligible for those? Is that a loophole?
I don't know yet. Yeah, that's a good question. And not to say that we didn't get any support, because the city of Troy did give us a reimbursement grant that allowed us to we bought some equipment from Tivoli that was in their transition. They were going much bigger than we were starting at. And we were only able to do that because the city gave us a grant, but we had to have the money to spend before they would pay it back. So that was a little tricky. But we did like a financing round, and we got some people in the community involved, and they bought into the company, and basically we sold off shares or like ownership members. That was one of the things that also made lending to us, traditional lenders, question what was happening, because we had too many member owners. They were like, why are all these people involved in this thing? And it's uncomfortable to us, and we don't lend to that. So, all these things that were like, oh, we have to do this step because we need this money right now and there's no other way to get it. Okay, we have this money, but man, the way we did this made it so that we couldn't get this money. But these are things that you don't know until you know them.
I think that's such a great point. I also think when it comes to grants and when it comes to government contracts, it's a particularly interesting time. I think one thing that is often really glossed over is the fact that you could win this multi-million-dollar government contract, and the mechanics of that contract are such that you then have to go out and find alternate capital to finance that government contract, only for maybe an administration change for that government contract to now be withdrawn, but you've now taken out, potentially at terrible terms, other capital to finance that the servicing of that contract, and now you're left without the contract, without the business, with no form of I think this is like something that most people don't think about, and it's awful. I don't know. I'm just saying this just to like, I don't know, maybe get it out of my own system. I was looking at a potential opportunity for farm to people, and I was like, but what?
And it seems to impact the farming community very heavily. I've been following the solar on farm land.
Yes. People took out the financing to do that.
And then now they're not. And they're just like,
I can't pay for an $80,000 solar.
And it's a loophole that most people don't understand. And like I said, it's, I didn't even think about that until I had to think about it.
Yeah.
And the grant world is very interesting because as a for-profit business, I can't actually have volunteers, but I can create educational internship programs for people. So it's all in how you like define something.
Yeah. This is where I think there's certainly like waste, fraud, and abuse. But I also think that there's a lack of common sense in just all of this. And it's like, to me, it's like, can we just get back, like simplifying everything? If you win a government contract, can't there be like a mechanism for payment that makes sense? Can't there be some sort of guarantee that makes sense? And if you streamline a system and streamline access to capital and have it not go through a million part where you subcontract this part out or you delegate this part out, you'll eliminate the waste, fraud, and abuse just by doing that, just by simplifying it. I think it's interesting, and I think you're a small farming, and something that's so important to me is helping our small farmers and figuring out how to create a platform for small farmers where that food becomes as conveniently accessible to New Yorkers as shopping on Amazon or shopping on Fresh Direct or shopping with the bigger players. That's where my passion for all of this comes from. And the thing that perpetually comes up is access to capital and access to infrastructure, all of the things that cost so much, and just every pathway I go down to figure out why these things are as convoluted as they are, there's just unnecessary barriers that have been built up along the way.
Yeah, and particularly,
I appreciate you telling us yours.
Thanks.
Sorry.
But the particularly exists in the mushroom cultivation community because so many people are like, I'm going to start in my closet and just grow in my garage, and I'm going to provide to the 3 restaurants near me and maybe a farmer's market. Mm-hmm. And so mushroom farmers fly under the radar for almost everything. And many people who are very friendly to fungi don't often people well. And so they just want to be in their fungi world and kind of like, I'm here with all my mushrooms. And so that's one of the things that I'm trying to do is gather more the mushroom farmers across New York to raise the voices of everybody so that there's a farmer near me who's had their insurance dropped 3 times. Because a new underwriter will come in and be like, these are poisonous, you're going to kill people, and then we can't carry you. And so he had to go through 3 insurance companies before someone would hold his insurance for more than 3 years. The fact that there is no cottage industry provision for fresh produce, and mushrooms being a specialty crop have such a short shelf life that if you don't move all of your product, you have to do something with them. In order for farmers to do that, or someone to do something with a product that then you can sell, you have to have a food processor license. And so what a lot of beginning bakers or other kind of small scale producers can do is certify their kitchen in order to produce something in a safe way for other people to consume. Well, that doesn't exist for farms. And so for someone who started in a garage that then has, I have 10 pounds of mushrooms, which isn't a lot of mushrooms, but when you've only grown 20 pounds and that's
half your crop.
What am I going to do with all these mushrooms? You have to do something with them, dehydrating them, turning them into jerky, or making a pate that you can then jar or whatever, becomes untenable because you have to have a commercial kitchen. Or else you have to pay someone to be able to do that. You can't just do that in your kitchen, even though you only have 10 pounds and you're going to do it in like an hour. So that's a thing that we're also trying to pass in New York, is to allow for small farmers that access to that cottage industry law. There's so many issues that I didn't even know people were wrestling with until I started reaching out to these other mushroom farmers that are like, oh yeah, by the way, I wasn't able to do this thing. If someone just is sitting on that issue and not really telling anybody, nothing is going to get done. And so the only way that we can really pass things is by talking and educating. Now it comes back, I guess it all comes back to education.
Yeah. It's why we're doing these, and I think it's important to talk about it. And we're also we're all building all the time, and there's a lot of structural things that exist around us that need awareness and education so that we can restructure what those barriers are and create a better future that, again, going back to, I'm going to be like common sense person, but go back to common sense. If you're growing something and you need an outlet to like make your business survive, and there's a good reason why you should be able to turn your 10 pounds of mushrooms into a pate or into a jerky that's now shelf stable and now has 6 months or whatever it is. And that means that your business has a longer shelf life. It can survive longer. And we can have more small farmers. We can have more people cultivating interesting crops, doing things that are, a net positive and also healthy. We should celebrate those people, and we should help them and not send in the Department of Ag and Markets to shut them down or whatever that is. And I feel like there's more of that. And, oh, you didn't check this box properly, or yeah.
Yeah, that's what the thing about common sense is. It's not so common.
Yeah, that's the good. Yeah. I guess you're shifting perspectives on mushrooms in many ways. What do you still feel is like one of the biggest misconceptions out there that you want people to sort of evolve on?
Sure. So I teach like a 4-course class at a 2-year college. That's like a continuing education thing. And everybody wants to know how to safely identify and harvest wild mushrooms because mushrooms will kill you. That's what most people are like, oh, all mushrooms are going to kill you. And I think that one of the statistics that I just learned recently was that more people die every year from lettuce because of listeria than mushroom poisoning.
Wow.
Yeah. And most of the mushroom poisoning happens because of cultural misidentifications. So people who move from Southeast Asia to the United States see what is an amanita mushroom that is a death cap or a destroying angel, and it looks like something that's edible in their native region. And so they hurt themselves with it. It's not people who are from this area that have been informed about the potential hazardous mushrooms. It's those misidentifications. And so, again, it comes down to education. So it's, if you are interested in eating from the wild, know what you're doing. There are enough plants too that can hurt you. If you can see Queen Anne's lace or think you see Queen Anne's lace and it could be a poison hemlock, and you're just like, oh, I can eat this root because it's a wild carrot, and then you die. So it's really all about making sure you know what you're doing and you know what you're consuming. Because when you find food in the forest and if you're camping or if you're just near your home and you're like, oh my God, this is garlic mustard and those are scarlet cups and the neighbor has some chickens or I had some chickens. I can make my own omelet right now with these things that I just had in the woods that were growing and cook it within minutes of being in the wild. It's such a joy and it's so fascinating to be able to do that.
I'm going to do that with you just so I don't mistakenly.
Sure.
Yeah.
We actually run a foraged food festival every year. So that is something that we do. We do some foraging walks, and then we deliver foraged ingredients to restaurants up in the capital region. So all the chefs make foraged ingredient food for the week. Yeah.
Where it's outside of Troy?
So we started in Troy, and this year, because we moved and a bunch of things happened, we only have, I think, 4 restaurants on board. But like last year, we had places in Schenectady, Albany, and Troy. And I think we were over a dozen restaurants that were participating.
Let us know. Maybe we do one down here.
Awesome.
What time of year do you do this?
So this year's Foraged Food Festival is May 4th through the 10th. So it's early spring things, but we're talking about doing something because there's foraged stuff in the wild all the time.
Yeah.
So we're talking about doing a little like pop-up in the summer and then one in the fall too. But the idea is to grow this across the state because people forage oysters in Long Island, and fishing is foraging too. So you really can forage things anywhere. And even here in the city, you can find things that are edible in lots, and as long as it's not like dog range.
Yeah.
So you just want
figs. There's some great figs.
Or like wild apples and things like that. Yeah.
Incredible. Awesome. I feel like we've covered a lot. What excites you most about the future of what you're doing, and what do you hope to achieve like in the next 5 years? You gave me your sort of like 2015 or 2016 5-year vision, and it came true. You've got a farm. You're now working on some really momentous things in government and in policy, but also in growing a culinary mushroom farm. So what does the next 5 years look like for you, Avery?
Yeah. I want to grow my mycelial network for sure. We supported an engineering team at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute to make a mycofilter that will take zinc and copper out of mining impacted waters. So seeing more projects like that happen and being able to provide the mycelium for it is fascinating to me. Doesn't really make the money though. Expanding the reach of our culinary mushrooms is what we want to do. One of the things that we were limited by was the space of our building. We were in a 3,000 square foot building, and so we could only grow so many mushrooms. Where we are now at Indian Ladder Farms, the one shipping container that is our grow room is almost as much square footage as we were growing in Troy, and we have room to put 3 more containers. So over the next 5 years, we are going to get back to our production level that we were in at Troy, and then expand a little bit easier, a little bit more organically. We have the space already. So over the next 5 years, we're going to continue to build our network of restaurants and culinary partners, and as well as educational opportunities.
I love it. What do you think the timeline is on, obviously you've got the hearing in May. What's a positive outcome from that hearing? And then what's a timeline for potentially New York to be making any moves in the sort of legalization? space?
So this is our 4th year in our psilocybin containing mushroom advocacy, and are not getting any pushback. The lawmakers that we talk to are all like, how are we doing this? And want to make sure that there are appropriate safeguards for people to successfully navigate these waters. This bill that we are educating people on right now, I feel has the best safeguards and gives the broadest access. And now our job is to re-educate the lawmakers that we talked to over the last couple years to get them onto the bills that were already in existence to also support this bill. We have been doing a lot of work. I think in the last 2 months, I have sat with over a dozen lawmakers or their legislative directors. This hearing will splash this knowledge around the entire assembly. They don't share well with the Senate, but we may have to do something similar with the Senate. I feel like this hearing will generate enough momentum to at least get people comfortable with possibly getting out of committee next year, maybe onto the floor. I think at most we're talking 3 to 5 years. Best case scenario, they're like, oh, this is great, let's just do it. And they pass it this year. Everybody hope for that, right?
Yeah. Awesome. On that note, Avery, thank you so much for coming down, spending the night with us. I really appreciate it. And everybody check out Color City Mushrooms.
Cool.
Thank you for listening to Know Your Food, a podcast from Farm to People. If today's conversation got you thinking differently about what's on your plate or where it comes from, we'd love if you shared this episode with a friend or left us a review. It helps more people discover the folks reimagining the future of food from the ground up. And if you're in the New York tri-state area, you can shop from our network of small, regenerative, independent farms and makers at farmtopeople.com and stay in the loop by signing up for our newsletter or joining us on Instagram at farmtopeople. Until next time, eat well and know your food.